a late winter evening, when the sky had settled into a heavy gray, and the wind carried the kind of cold that stings the bones, the man was walking home along the narrow road that curved around the edge of the forest. He had finished a long day of work and wanted nothing more than warmth, but something in the hush of the evening pulled his attention toward the roadside bushes. As he drew closer, he heard a faint whimpering, muffled and trembling like a cry swallowed by the wind. He stepped off the road, his boots sinking into the frozen ground, and parted the branches gently. Beneath the tangled cover of twigs and frost, he found a yellow Labrador mother curled tightly around 3 tiny puppies whose bodies shivered as if every breath was a battle. The mother lifted her head weakly, her eyes filled with fear, exhaustion, and a small, desperate hope. It was clear she had been abandoned long before the cold had settled in. The man felt a stir of something deep inside him, an ache that came from knowing that in such cold, survival was more a matter of mercy than strength. He knelt down slowly, letting the mother recognize that he meant no harm. She sniffed his hand, hesitated, then rested her head on the snow again, as though surrendering her strength to him. He tucked the puppies gently inside his coat, feeling their tiny bodies press against his chest, and then wrapped his jacket around the mother. The world around him seemed to disappear into silence as he carried them back toward the faint glow of his home. The warmth from his small fireplace greeted them as he laid the mother on a thick blanket and placed the puppies close to her belly. She looked at him with gratitude that words could never hold, and the man felt something inside him soften. Over the next days he washed her wounds, fed her warm broth, and let the puppies sleep on his lap whenever she rested. Slowly, the fear in the mother's eyes faded, replaced by trust. The house, once quiet and lonely, began to feel alive with small, clumsy paws and soft barks. Neighbors would ask why he suddenly looked happier, and he would only smile, never quite finding the words to explain how saving them had somehow saved him too. Months passed and the Labrador mother grew strong again, her coat shining like pale gold in the sunlight, her puppies now bold little explorers who followed the man from room to room. They had become a family shaped not by blood, but by the moment kindness overcame cold. The man could feel that the bond between him and the mother had grown into something unspoken yet powerful, something that made her rise whenever he left the house and sit patiently by the window until he returned. He had taken them into his home thinking he was rescuing them, but as the seasons changed and the cold outside gave way to new life, he began to understand that the warmth they brought him reached deeper than the fire that burned in his living room. There was a quiet promise between them now, a sense that compassion never fades. It circles back, sometimes when it is needed the most. As the months slipped by, the house settled into a rhythm so natural that even the man sometimes forgot what it felt like before the Labrador mother and her pups had arrived. The mother had grown confident, her instincts sharp again, her body strong enough to run across the yard with the joy of a creature who had reclaimed life. The puppies, meanwhile, had become mischievous companions, turning the quiet corners of the home into small adventures. The man, already used to their constant presence, believed that life had found a new balance. That belief stayed with him until the evening when circumstances shifted without warning. He had left the house a little before dusk to help a neighbor with a stubborn generator, thinking he would return within the hour. The Labrador mother watched him from the doorway with the same steady loyalty she displayed every time he stepped out. But that night, as darkness crept across the sky and cold wind rustled through the old wooden fence outside, a different presence approached the house, one that carried intentions far from kindness. The man's friend, someone he once trusted casually but never deeply, had noticed the man's recent routine and the new additions to the home. Believing the house would be empty, he chose that evening to cross a line that would change everything. He slipped around the back, forced open a loose window the man kept meaning to repair, and climbed inside with a flashlight in hand, unaware that the Labrador mother and her growing pups were not only awake but alert. The friend moved quietly through the hallway, scanning drawers and shelves, looking for valuables the man never really cared about. The Labrador mother, hearing the unfamiliar intrusion, stood silently from her resting place near the fireplace. Her ears pricked forward, her eyes narrowing with protective focus. She moved with the controlled grace of an animal trained by life rather than commands. She nudged the puppies behind the sofa, ensuring their safety, then crept toward the hallway where the faint glow of the intruder's flashlight flickered across the wall. A deep, low growl rose in her throat, not the sound of anger but of warning. The friend froze, turning his light toward the darkness where her silhouette formed, golden fur catching a sliver of the street lamp glow leaking through the window. He tried to speak her name, tried to assert the illusion of familiarity he thought he held, but the mother knew the difference between a visitor and a threat. With a swift, decisive movement that came from both instinct and loyalty, she lunged just enough to force him backward, knocking the flashlight from his hand and sending it clattering across the wooden floor. The man's friend stumbled, shocked, realizing too late that he had misjudged not only the house but the spirit guarding it. The Labrador mother did not attack with aggression but with purpose. She cornered him in the narrow hallway, her body braced, her growls steady yet controlled, preventing him from reaching the window or the front door. Every time he tried to move, she advanced just enough to freeze him again, her posture unwavering. The puppies, sensing the tension but trusting their mother, stayed hidden behind the sofa, their tiny whimpers barely audible under the weight of the situation. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the friend remained trapped, his confidence crumbling under the presence of a creature whose loyalty burned brighter than fear. Outside, the man was returning along the dimly lit path, unaware of the drama unfolding inside his home, unaware that the very life he had once rescued was now standing between him and betrayal. He walked with the casual pace of someone expecting nothing unusual, but inside his house, a silent battle of wills had already played out. A battle in which the Labrador mother had chosen to repay kindness not with repayment, but with protection that only love and instinct could summon. The man reached his doorstep with no suspicion of danger, brushing the cold from his sleeves as he took out his keys. But the moment he pushed the door open, the atmosphere inside felt different, charged, tense, holding its breath. The house was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the dying fire in the living room. Before he could call out to the Labrador mother or the pups, he heard a low, steady growl coming from the hallway. His instincts sharpened instantly. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, letting his eyes adjust to the shadows. As he moved closer, the dim outline of the yellow Labrador appeared first, her body rigid and poised like a guardian carved from living stone. Her eyes flickered toward him with recognition, then quickly shifted back to the shape tracked against the far wall. Only then did the man see the figure trembling beneath the pressure of her presence. His friend, the man he had once shared meals and long conversations with, now cornered like a thief caught by fate. The friend opened his mouth to explain, to excuse, to twist the moment into something less shameful, but the words collapsed before leaving his lips. The truth hung in the air heavier than anything he could claim. The man's first instinct was disbelief, then disappointment as deep as the cold outside. He placed a hand gently on the Labrador mother's back, feeling the tension beneath her fur, the electrified loyalty that had held his home intact in his absence. He knelt beside her, whispering her name softly, letting her know that he understood, that she had acted not out of aggression but devotion. Slowly, she stepped aside, though her eyes remained fixed on the intruder, ensuring that one wrong movement would bring her protective instincts roaring back. The friend, realizing his escape was no longer a matter of slipping away, but of facing the consequences of his choices, sank to the floor. The man didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Disappointment alone filled the space like a verdict. He asked a few quiet questions, each one cutting through the fragile excuses his friend tried to offer. Why had he come? Why had he betrayed trust? Why had he risked everything for things that held so little value? The friend stumbled over his explanations, but every sentence felt hollow, like a story even he no longer believed. Eventually, the man asked him to leave, not with anger, but with a calm finality that carried far more weight. The friend hesitated, glancing nervously at the Labrador who still watched him with unwavering focus, then slipped out of the house, disappearing into the night he had arrived from. The man closed the door behind him, feeling a strange silence settle, not emptiness, but a quiet reminder of how quickly trust could fracture and how unexpectedly loyalty could rise. He returned to the Labrador mother and knelt before her, his voice low and warm as he stroked the fur between her ears. She leaned into his hand, her body finally relaxing as if now that he was home, her duty could soften. The puppies emerged cautiously from behind the sofa, tumbling toward him with small cries of relief. He gathered them close, letting their warmth fill the hollow left by the night's events. As he sat there on the wooden floor with the mother at his side, and the pups climbing over his lap, he felt the weight of gratitude settle deep in his chest. Months ago, he had carried them home through the freezing dark, believing that he was saving fragile lives that had nearly been lost. Now he understood the fuller truth: kindness has its own memory. its own way of finding a path back, not always in the way one expects but in the exact moment it is needed. The Labrador mother had not only protected his home, she had protected the trust they had built together, solidifying a bond formed in cold weather and sealed in the quiet heroism of a single night. And as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting warm light across the room, the man realized he was no longer just someone who rescued them. He was someone they would stand by, forever.